It started as nothing more than a standard appointment. Lara, 38, had been married to Jordan for over a decade, 2 kids, a nice house, and what looked like a stable life. But behind closed doors, their connection had faded. Jordan had become distant, buried in work, and emotionally unavailable. Lara often felt like a ghost in her own marriage, so when she went in for her annual checkup with Dr. Patel, a new physician in town, she didn't expect anything other than the usual. He was professional, attentive, but unusually warm. He noticed she seemed tired and asked how she was doing beyond the physical. The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in months. Week by week, Laura found reasons to follow up. A prescription refill, a vague symptom, and each time the appointments got longer. Their conversations drifted from health into personal territory, her dreams, her frustrations, her loneliness. Dr. Patel never crossed physical lines during appointments, but emotionally they were deep in it. One afternoon, as she sat on the exam table after what was supposed to be a brief follow-up, he said softly, "I see you. I mean really see you. I don't think you're as invisible as you think you are." Lara broke down. That moment of emotional intimacy shifted everything. Over the next few months, they began texting outside of office hours. At first, it was casual, then confessional, then intimate. It wasn't long before they crossed a line with a single kiss in the office parking lot. Lara never told Jordan, at least not at first, but the emotional affair with her doctor made her realize just how hollow her marriage had become. When she finally confessed, it wasn't the kiss that crushed her husband. It was the months of hiding, the emotional bond she formed with someone else. The fallout was brutal. Therapy, separation, guilt. And Dr. Patel, he transferred out of town within the year, likely due to an anonymous complaint. Emotional attachment can blur boundaries in positions of power, especially when one party holds professional authority and the other is in a state of vulnerability. In many cases, this dynamic emerges between patients and doctors, therapists and clients, or even teachers and students, situations where trust, dependency, and emotional intimacy can build unintentionally. These relationships are not inherently inappropriate, but they exist in a delicate psychological space. When someone is hurting, misunderstood, or neglected in their personal life, particularly in a romantic relationship, they may unconsciously seek validation and connection elsewhere. The person in a position of authority, like a doctor, may become a surrogate for emotional needs that are unmet at home. The very nature of a medical or therapeutic encounter, confidential, attentive one-on-one, can create an intense emotional environment. A patient might interpret warmth or empathy as a deeper interest, while the professional, if not firmly grounded in ethical boundaries, might reciprocate those feelings out of a misguided sense of intimacy or ego. This type of emotional entanglement often begins subtly. A doctor might remember a detail about a patient's personal life, ask a compassionate question about how they're coping emotionally, or offer support that feels unusually personalized. These gestures, though benign in isolation, can feel life, affirming to someone who feels invisible or emotionally abandoned in their relationship. This attention, particularly when coming from someone perceived as intelligent, composed, and caring, can trigger a rush of emotional gratification. In cases where the professional is also struggling with personal issues, such as loneliness or burnout, they might begin to look forward to these interactions in ways that cross professional intent. Before either party realizes it, an emotional connection forms that extends far beyond the original purpose of the relationship. And unlike overt physical affairs, emotional affairs are more difficult to define, making them even more insidious. One of the most dangerous aspects of this blurred boundary is that it often masquerades as care. Both parties can convince themselves that nothing inappropriate is happening because there is no physical touch, no sexual exchange. However, the depth of emotional investment and secrecy can rival, and often surpass, the intensity of physical infidelity. The married individual may find themselves dressing up before appointments, feeling excitement when a text message from the professional arrives, or confiding in them more deeply than they do with their spouse. This process creates a powerful emotional dependency. when one's emotional energy and sense of validation are redirected away from their partner and towards someone outside the relationship, a form of betrayal occurs, even if nothing sexual has taken place. From a psychological perspective, this type of attachment can be understood through transference, a phenomenon where individuals project feelings onto figures of authority that were once directed at significant people in their past, such as parents or previous partners. In romantic relationships that are emotionally starving, the desire to be seen, heard, and affirmed can become so overwhelming that any attention is mistaken for affection. The patient might start to feel like the professional gets them in a way their spouse never did. This can lead to idealization, where the professional is viewed as flawless or the perfect antidote to the emotional pain they're experiencing at home. The danger here lies in the illusion. It's a distorted connection built in a highly controlled, time-limited setting, not the messy, real world of long-term romantic partnership. When the boundaries finally break, whether through a text exchange that becomes too personal, a lingering look that crosses a line, or a confession of feelings, the consequences ripple far beyond the immediate moment. The spouse at home, when they eventually learn of the emotional betrayal, often feels as hurt as if a full-blown affair had occurred. Emotional infidelity can damage trust just as deeply, especially when it involved secrecy, repeated contact, and an ongoing emotional reliance. In some cases, the professional's career may be jeopardized if ethical lines were crossed, particularly in fields with strict codes of conduct like medicine or therapy. These emotional attachments are rarely about love in the pure sense. They are often symptomatic of larger fractures within the relationship and within the individuals involved. When someone turns to a person in power for emotional validation, it's not necessarily because they want to fall in love with them. It's because they need to feel important, wanted, and understood. And when that need is met, even inappropriately, it can be incredibly hard to let go, even once the damage is done. Infidelity is often misunderstood as being purely about physical betrayal, but in reality, the emotional component can be far more destructive and complicated. Emotional infidelity, when someone invests significant emotional energy, time, and intimacy into a person outside their committed relationship, can leave deeper scars than a sexual affair. This type of betrayal often evolves quietly. It begins with connection, builds through private communication, and deepens with the sharing of thoughts, fears, and vulnerabilities that should ideally belong within the romantic partnership. It may involve someone turning to another person for emotional support, validation, or even a sense of excitement that is missing from their relationship. Unlike physical cheating, which typically requires deliberate intent, emotional affairs can happen more gradually and subtly, often taking both people by surprise. What makes it more dangerous is the denial that comes with it, because nothing physical has happened. People often convince themselves that they're not doing anything wrong. The betrayal in emotional infidelity stems from a shift in emotional loyalty. A partner who once turned to their significant other in times of distress or joy now chooses someone else, sometimes a friend, coworker, or even a trusted professional, to share their thoughts and feelings. The secrecy and intimacy shared with this third party can become a wedge in the primary relationship, leading to emotional distance, resentment, and confusion. When someone in a relationship begins withholding emotional details, becomes protective of their phone, or hides communication with another person, it signals a breach of emotional trust. These signs often precede the partner's realization that an emotional affair is taking place. What's particularly painful for the betrayed partner is the feeling of being replaced, not just physically, but as the most important emotional connection in their spouse's life. They may find themselves wondering why their partner can open up so effortlessly to someone else while shutting down with them. The complexity of emotional infidelity lies in its psychological roots. In many cases, it begins as an innocent or even therapeutic interaction. A neglected partner might find solace in a colleague who listens without judgment, Someone in an emotionally abusive or disconnected marriage may lean into the kind words of a friend or someone they admire. The emotional validation they receive begins to soothe wounds their partner either can't or won't acknowledge. This validation often turns into dependency, something they begin to crave. As the emotional intimacy deepens, the third party begins to occupy a larger space in the person's life, often becoming the first person they want to talk to in the morning or confide in during moments of stress. Eventually, the emotional investment in the outside relationship can surpass the investment in the primary one, leading to a major shift in the dynamics of both. Emotional affairs are harder to detect and even harder to confess. Unlike sexual infidelity, where there may be physical evidence or a defining moment, emotional cheating operates in a gray area. The partner engaging in it might defend their behavior, claiming that the relationship is purely platonic, even though the emotional energy, secrecy, and intensity say otherwise. This ambiguity can create a storm of gaslighting, guilt, and denial that further damages the primary relationship. The partner being cheated on often struggles to articulate their feelings. After all, how do you prove that your spouse being emotionally close to someone else is a betrayal if there was no physical contact? But the emotional weight of knowing that someone else holds your partner's emotional world can be devastating. In some cases, emotional infidelity can be a precursor to physical cheating, but not always. For many, the emotional connection is the main goal. They aren't seeking sex. They're seeking to feel needed, loved, and understood. This can be particularly true in long-term relationships where routine, parenting responsibilities, financial pressures, and time have dulled the emotional spark. The emotional affair becomes a form of escapism, a fantasy space where they are still desirable, interesting, and seen. But the illusion of this connection can lead to intense confusion and heartbreak when reality inevitably intervenes. Emotional infidelity, like its physical counterpart, often ends in pain, not only for the betrayed partner, but also for the person who engaged in it and the third party who was emotionally entangled. What emotional infidelity exposes is a deep emotional hunger. It's not just about unmet needs, but about the way those needs are handled, secretly, dishonestly, and outside the framework of the committed relationship. And because emotional affairs are built on genuine feelings and authentic connection, they can leave long-lasting psychological wounds that take years to fully heal even after the relationship ends or is repaired.